Welcome, and thank you all for being with us tonight for the Palo Alto School Board Candidates Forum for the November 5th, 2024 general election. I'm Hannah Lu, a member of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto, and I will be the moderator for this forum, together with two Gang High School student moderators, Karen Tan and Luke Ni. Tonight's forum is co-sponsored by the Palo Alto Council of PTAs. The League of Women Voters is a nationwide organization that was founded in 1920 after women won the right to vote. The League envisions a democracy where every person has a desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to vote. The League is nonpartisan, meaning we neither support nor oppose any candidates or parties. Our organization has two distinct roles. One is advocacy for public policy issues that we have studied and developed formal positions. The other is voter service, which brings voters impartial information on issues and candidates. Voter service is the hat we're wearing today in presenting this forum where you can learn about the candidates running to represent you in the Palo Alto School District. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to hear from 5 candidates who are running for the school board. 3 of the 5 seats on the school board are up for election this year. The candidates are, in alphabetical order, Rowena Chu, Nicole Chu Wang, Chris Callahan, Allison Kamai, and Josh Saltzman. Candidate Matar Hussain was contacted but did not respond to our request. Before we begin, I want to remind the candidates and the audience that this evening we're hosting a forum, not a debate. There is no rebuttal and we will not allow any personal attacks. Candidates have been asked to focus on their own campaign. I'd also like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under guidelines set for this forum. We'd like to thank Mid-Penn Media for bringing this event to our audience on Zoom. This forum recording will be posted to League's YouTube channel, the link to which will be found on our website, lwvpaloalto.org. It will also be aired on Mid-Penn's channel. Note that whenever this recording is aired, it must be shown in its entirety to ensure that no candidate statements are used out of context. All candidates have agreed to this requirement. Now, I'd like to go over the format of our session. We're scheduled to be finished by 8:30 p.m., and to help keep us all on track, a League member will be keeping time by raising a yellow paddle when 10 seconds remain and the red stop sign when time is up. I remind our candidates to respect our time limits. We will enforce them. In lieu of opening statements, we'll ask each candidate to give a 1.5-minute description of his or her qualifications to serve on the school board. We will then have a question period. Candidates will be called on in a randomly determined order for each question and will have up to 1 minute to respond, except for 2 questions where candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond. Questions for this forum have been solicited in advance from all those who sign up to attend. In addition, tonight, you may send live questions by email to forumquestions@lwvpaloalto.org. This email address is being posted in the Zoom chat box right now. Note that audience members cannot comment in the chat. League members will be screening the questions we receive to avoid duplication and to cover as wide a range of issues as possible. We may also combine similar questions into a single one. In lieu of closing statements, for the final question, we'll ask, what question do you wish we had asked in this forum that we didn't ask and why? This gives candidates an opportunity to talk about an issue that the candidate feels deserves more attention. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer in reverse order of the opening question. Now let's get started. We'll begin with the opening question now. Again, the question is, please describe your qualifications to serve on the Palo Alto School Board. Candidates have 1.5 minutes to answer this question. Ms. Chu, you'll be the first.
Good evening. My name is Rowena Chu. Thank you for being here this evening. My proudest qualification for serving on the Palo Alto School Board is that I'm the parent of 4 children. I have children in 1st grade, 4th grade, 7th grade, and 10th grade, so I'm positioned to understand challenges facing parents in elementary, middle, and high. In terms of academic qualifications, I have 7 degrees that span a number of different disciplines, certainly humanities, anthropology, culture, literature, but perhaps more importantly for governance, business, and law. My experience in corporate America means that I am able to handle big budgets and projects with many team members that perhaps don't agree with one another. And I believe this uniquely allows me to govern a complex district where there are currently many features. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan?
First off, I just want to say thank you for having us here. This is a great opportunity, and I appreciate it. My name is Chris Callahan, and 8 years ago, I left a successful career as an engineering manager at Google to become a stay-at-home dad for our kids. And at that time, I looked around and I'm like, how can I help? How can I, help out in our schools? And I joined our PTA as a PTA board member. I've been one for the past 7 years. I was a PTA treasurer for 5 years, where I got a reputation as being the guy who made budget presentations to be the most fun and entertaining part of a PTA meeting. Because I really care about clarity and transparency in our organization because it builds up trust. I became a PTA co-president 5 days before they closed down the schools for the pandemic, and so I heard from a lot of parents, and I really understand how parents feel about our schools. I've done other things. I've dressed up as Doobie the Dragon and danced around for our kids. I've fundraised for Pi. But 2.5 years ago, I became a substitute teacher. I've actually taught in every single one of 17 schools in our district. I've taught from grades K through 12, and I may even have taught your kids. And so my experience that I'm bringing to this role are as a PTA leader, as a parent of 2 kids who are in the district, both 4th generation Palo Altans, as an experienced manager in industry, and also as a substitute teacher, where I've seen what it's like inside of our classrooms, and I understand what works well and what is not working so well and perhaps can be improved, and I know how to achieve it.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai?
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for having us. I'm Allison Kamai, and I'm here first and foremost as an engaged parent. I have a daughter in middle school at Greens. I've been in the district for more than 6 years, and a kindergartner at Escondido, so looking at another 13 more. I've volunteered in many different capacities in the district, so both at the site school, where I've been room parent for years, also at the district level. So a couple of years ago, I served on an ad hoc school board committee for childcare, where we worked to expand aftercare options in the district for low-income special needs, foster care, and unhoused youth. I also co-founded a position at the Palo Alto PTA Council, PTAC level, on gun violence prevention, where we've been at all of the back-to-school nights doing community education and outreach on gun violence prevention. I'm also here as an experienced attorney. After graduating Harvard Law School, I came here and represented youth in Santa Clara County. To be a child's attorney means you represent them not just in family court, not just in their guardianship proceedings, but also in their deportation case, also in their IEP in school, and also in anti-bullying issues. So I come from a child protection, but also a child empowerment perspective. How can we protect our kids, but also how can we give them the tools to protect themselves? For the last 10 years, I have been doing policy work at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. Through that work, I have learned that all change is local, and that's why I'm here running for Palo Alto School Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chu-Wan?
My name is Nicole Chu Wong, and I am a mother of 2 students in the district. My youngest goes to Preschool Family, which is a preschool program run through the district at Greendale through the adult school, of which I am a student because I do parent education. I have a 1st grader at Mandarin Immersion program at Ohlone, and I run an educational equity nonprofit in the district that provides free after-school enrichment to almost 200 socioeconomically disadvantaged PAUSD middle schoolers, as well as providing sustained service learning opportunities to almost 200 PAUSD high school students and many other high school students and college students locally. That gives me a level of understanding of all the levels of our school that it goes much further than my own personal experience with my own children. I ran for school board in 2022, and when I lost, I said, how can I do the work that I said needed to be done? So I dove in to do the work. In addition to leaving my career at Google to work with Dreamcatchers, I have become the co-president of the Chinese Parents Club, where we provide targeted resources and new family orientation and community events and parent education. I volunteered for my children's PTAs and fundraised for the Ohlone Farm and the South Palo Alto Food Closet. I've served on an ad hoc committee for parent communication, as well as serving on Lana Conaway's Equity and Excellence Alliance. I'm doing the work. I am a parent. I'm an entrepreneur coming from high tech. I am an operational strategist who has managed complex projects with diverse stakeholders and multi-million-dollar budgets. I am prepared for this role and ready to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Josh Saltzman, and I'm running for school board because I want to work on your behalf to ensure we're providing the best possible educational opportunities for all our students. I'm the parent of 3 very different kids, a 10th grader at Gunn, an 8th grader at Synapse, who will start at Gunn next year, and a 3rd grader at Nixon. Jack, our youngest, was diagnosed with hearing loss when he was 2. So 6 years ago, after founding 2 education technology startups, after a career in product design, after getting degrees in biology from Princeton and design from Pratt, I became a full-time parent and Jack's lead caregiver. In the last 6 years, Jack has also been diagnosed with autism, and I've learned a ton about how different kids can be and how different their needs are in terms of how we support them both in and out of the classroom. I've also had the opportunity to be a class parent, served twice on the PTA board at Nixon, and site council at Greendale. And during this time, I've built trusting and collaborative relationships with parents, teachers, and principals, and my endorsements reflect that. As a designer, entrepreneur, and parent, I've gained valuable experience and skills. This includes being able to understand both data and emotions, see things from others' perspectives, listen with empathy, build consensus, and come up with creative solutions to challenging problems. I hope you'll elect me this November so I can bring these skills to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all. Now it's time for candidates to answer audience questions. I'll ask the first 4 questions. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer these questions. Describe one district program that develops students' essential life skills, such as resiliency, creativity, and responsibility. Can that program be expanded to reach more students? Ms. Kamai, you'll be the first to go.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the programs in the elementary school on socio-emotional learning and what I've seen take place there that are really helping kids at all of those elementary ages really process different feelings that they have and what to do with them. And that was a pilot project at Escondido. My understanding is it worked really well and has been expanded across the district. So I think that's one of the things that does teach kids early on life skills in terms of how to confront social relationships, social frictions, and also their own mental health needs and challenges, and how to work on them both with trusted figures and also with peers.
Thank you. Ms. Saltzman, Mr. Saltzman.
I think one of the most important life skills that we can teach our students is the skill of sort of knowing yourself and what motivates you and what drives you to be curious and how to find fulfillment in life in a variety of different ways. And there's 2 things I'd like to highlight that I think address that. The first is the Pathways program that we have in our high schools. I think those are fantastic programs that provide students with the availability of a variety of different opportunities that aren't just typical academic programs and give them a chance to try out things that they might not otherwise experience. The other is I'm really excited about Middle College being the newest high school in our district, and I'd love to see us continue to expand that program and emphasize it as a way for students who don't see the traditional high school model as being the right fit for them to have an opportunity to go to a different program that might fit them better.
Thank you. Ms. Chuan, please go ahead.
Well, there are many programs we have across our different schools. I wanted to call out the Challenge Day program that was actually a program that we brought in to Green Middle School for the last several years. I was fortunate to be able to be one of the trusted adult volunteers that facilitated that. And at Challenge Day, we work with experts that do this across the country, and I even believe across the nation, to help teach our children empathy and understanding and how to have curiosity, but also compassion for each other and think about how their actions affect other people and really be able to bond. We did this with 8th graders right before they were set to go to high school, and these important steps that we take so that we can, schools are big, and we need to find ways to make them smaller and to make students actually connect with one another and understand where each other is coming from. We do similar programs in high school as well, and I think while we can do things in the classroom and through our school culture, it's important that we acknowledge that sometimes bringing in outside help can help us facilitate deeper connection.
Thank you. Ms. Chu, please go ahead.
I'd like to highlight the JLS Connections program, where I was the board president for 3 years from 2020 to 2023. I think having a program such as JLS Connections, which has been going since 1996, in the middle school structure is very important because it creates a smaller environment where children can really get to know one another. It focuses on project work and it focuses on children finding their passions. In fact, one of the key cornerstone projects of the JLS Connections program is the so-called Passion Project, which is what they do in 6th grade. And then in 7th grade, they want the Guilds Project, and in 8th grade, they have the Rite of Passage Project. So what I think these 3 projects bring together is it gives an opportunity for a child at a very pivotal time in their lives. Middle school, I think, is difficult for many children to discover a particular passion they have and to run with it. And I think we should encourage all of our children in this district to do that.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Callahan.
The skill I'd like to emphasize is teamwork and collaboration. And we actually have many programs which help teach this to our kids, and the 2 ones which focus on it most intensely, I would say, are both our music and our physical education programs. I happen to be a music geek, so I'm going to talk about that. And the reason why teamwork is really important and collaboration is really important is because it helps build community. And we're trying to build a strong community amongst our children and in our schools. And so I've actually gotten the opportunity to teach, as a substitute teacher, many music classes in our district. And it's just amazing to see kids when they come together and how their eyes light up when their individual playing comes together and they're able to make something that is better, that is stronger, that is much more impressive than the noises they can make on their own, on their instruments, quite frankly. And so, and I've talked to other teachers about how we have an amazing music program in our district. I'd love to keep on supporting it. If we can expand it, great, but we already have one of the best around.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to our next question. While it's important to be fiscally prudent, the level of the district's financial reserve has caused some conflict with the union. How would you approach balancing fiscal responsibility with responding to the rising cost of living for district staff? Ms. Chu-Wan, please go ahead.
I'm in favor of spending down some of our reserve because it is very high and we have needs for which we can use it. I want to make sure that we do so in ways in which they're one-off costs because the reserve will not be replenished. And so while I would like to, I think we all acknowledge that teaching is generally, and our staff as well, education is generally paid lower than we would like across the board, even though we are one of the higher salaries in our area. I would want to make sure that we're not doing so from a bucket of funding in which it will not continue, because then that would not be sustainable, and that would be the worst case scenario, to have to pull back on teacher salaries and staff salaries. So I understand what a reserve is for. I think we can use it to fund initiatives and startup costs to get things going, but to use it for ongoing concerns me, and I want to make sure that we use the appropriate funds to fund ongoing matters.
Thank you. Ms. Chu.
As one of the candidates endorsed by Palo Alto Educators Association, I am, of course, very concerned about the rising cost of living for teachers in 2 ways. Firstly, in terms of ensuring the district is in line with paying teachers in commensurate districts, and also in terms of affordable housing. And I've obviously spoken out on both these issues. I agree that it does need to be balanced with fiscal prudency. So one of the things I would like to do, were I lucky enough to join the board, is look at other districts that are similar to ours to see whether our financial reserves are truly more swollen than commensurate districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan.
So our reserves are kind of big. I believe right now they're roughly $115 million as of the end of last year. And we had a $330 million budget, of which we spent 87% on salaries and benefits for our district employees, including our teachers. And honestly, I want to spend the money we have. We're actually obligated as a district to spend all the money we can. We can't pull a profit out of our schools. And so we need to find ways of responsibly spending that money. We need to, quite frankly, pay our teachers as much as we can afford to, because we want to have the best teachers in Palo Alto. We want to attract even more great teachers so that our kids get a great experience in our schools. And so we do need to be responsible, as Nicole mentions, with our funds. We need to make sure that we use ongoing funds to pay for ongoing expenses, and one-time funds can come out of our reserves. But we've got lots of one-time expenses we can put in there, and I think we can work out something that makes everyone happy.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I want to start by saying that I agree with my fellow candidates in terms of what they've said so far, so I don't want to repeat everything that they've said, but I would add a couple things, which is we do have large reserves. I think it's very important that we understand how those reserves can be used. It's my understanding that some of those reserves have been set aside for purposes and are not necessarily flexible. And there's others that are mandated in terms of how they can be used. So I think we do want to make sure we understand how those reserves actually break down and not just assume that all money is fungible. But that being said, I think making sure that we're doing a proper, thorough analysis of our funding, trying to figure out, how we can support all of our staff, including our teachers, as much as possible, is critical, and coming up with some creative ways to use the funds. Thank you.
Ms. Kamai.
Thanks for this question. That is an issue that will be squarely before the new board. And I also believe that we do not need to expand our reserves and should be looking at how we can spend that money in a way that best benefits our district. I'm proud to also be endorsed by the Teachers Union. One of my priorities is trust and transparency. And through that, I mean really working to hear from all of our stakeholders, including teachers, what their priorities are, so that we're getting community input about how to spend that money in ways that continue to strengthen the schools, the staff, the families, the children's, and our community members' experience in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. The current superintendent has been in the role since 2018, and his contract has been extended until 2027. How do you view the relationship between the board and the superintendent? What role does each play in the governance of the district? Mr. Saltzman, please go ahead.
Thanks so much for that question. I think it is really important that as school board members, we do understand what our role is in the school district. It's incredibly important that we allow our superintendent to do his job. The superintendent is the one employee that the school board has. All of the other employees in the district report into the superintendent. So it's very important that the school board not get in the way of that reporting structure. And I think that's critical because we do want to be able to make sure that we can hold our superintendent accountable for making progress toward the goals and priorities that the board sets. And those priorities should be reflective of the priorities of our community. So making sure that we do have that accountability, I think, is very, very important, and that requires that the board not overstep its bounds or micromanage the superintendent.
Thank you. Ms. Kaimai, please go ahead.
So the relationship between the board and the superintendent is critical to a well-functioning district. The board's role is to fire and hire the superintendent and to work and give oversight to the superintendent. And so that relationship is really key to making sure that everything is functioning. And so I would work really hard to make sure that is a relationship that where there's open communication, where there's regular dialogue, where the priorities are very, very clear of both the board and also what the superintendent and in turn the district staff and office need to do their job. And also that we are representing our constituents, and I echo Josh here, really holding our district accountable for the needs of our constituencies.
Thank you. Ms. Chu?
I agree with my fellow candidates that obviously to have a well-functioning district that we need a good relationship between the board and the superintendent. I understand the governance issues in the sense that the board's role is to hire and fire the superintendent. I will say, however, that I think this should be balanced with the needs of the parents and students and teachers within the district who voted the board members in the sense that their view of the superintendent obviously needs to be taken into account and listened to with respect so that they also feel represented, because these are positions on the board that are voted in by those who participate in the district.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan.
So there's much to agree with in terms of what's been said so far. But so effectively, I agree. The board's job is to effectively manage the superintendent. And in this role, I would draw upon my years of management experience to make sure that we set clear goals and hold the superintendent accountable for meeting those clear goals. But I also want to mention something else. The question contained an inherent assumption, which I believe is incorrect, which is they mentioned that his contract was extended by 3 years. I encourage anyone who's concerned about our superintendent to read the contract. All the contract does is it actually sets the conditions for an employment, and such that at any time, if the board decided that the superintendent was performing unsatisfactory fashion, they could give him a negative performance rating, and after a couple cycles of that, they could terminate him for cause. Or at any time, they can also terminate for no reason whatsoever, since it is an at-will employment relationship. So as such, this 3-year boogeyman isn't particularly relevant to any conversation on performance management.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Chu-Wan.
Well, my fellow candidates have talked about the functions of hiring and firing the superintendent. By far, the more important board role is to manage the superintendent. As someone who has managed teams and sought out management training, I understand that being a manager is not something that is just people are born with. You have to actively understand how to be a good manager and a good partner and work together without micromanaging, but also setting clear goals that are aligned with the greater goals of the district, and then talking about how you measure those goals. And so if there are parents and community members that are concerned about our superintendent's performance, it is the role of the board to hear those concerns and factor them into the goals that we set. But ultimately, the superintendent, it's like any role. They need to have clear goals and they need to be measured against them, and that's a fairness and a good management practice.
Thank you. The next question, there is a perception that PAUSD, specifically leadership, has moved away from a shared decision-making model to a more top-down model. How will you, as a board member, ensure that all voices in the PAUSD community are heard and valued? Mr. Callahan, you'll be the first one to respond.
Well, the first thing I'll do is make sure that as a board member, I'm available for conversation with anyone who has any concerns about our schools. You can actually reach out to me now. I'm Chris at chrisforschoolboard.com. I'm happy to hear from you. I consider that to be my full-time job right now, is to talk to people, to understand, and to try and get as complete a picture as I can of what's going on in our district, and to try and understand how we can improve it. And that obviously doesn't scale to constantly having conversations with every single person at all times. And so we also need to make sure that we institute good management practices, such as having surveys of our students, such as the Panorama survey, which already exists, also staff surveys, in order to find out how morale is going, what are the most pressing concerns, and what things should be being addressed in our district at all times.
Thank you. Ms. Chu-Wan.
We have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of members of our school community, and so it would be impossible to hear from all of them, but there are certainly forums that we have already. Right now, one of the most visible is open comment. Unfortunately, that is not the place for conversation, and I think that's what stems from a lot of dissatisfaction, because open forum at board meetings is not an opportunity for the board to speak. I am personally advocating, in order to improve mental health and wellness for all the community members in our schools, I think we need to have more community forums, town halls, open chances for us to engage. I would have office hours. I frequently review panorama survey results and the different ways that we collect feedback. But I think that opportunity for us to have conversations and try to group them in smaller groups so that more people can be heard is very important for us to do as a district and for me personally to do as a board member committed to earning the trust of our district.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you so much. I do agree with a lot of what's been said already. There are a couple things I would add. One is that I do think it's important that there be open lines of communication, not just between the community and the school board, but also between the community between the different members of the school community, teachers and staff, and within that reporting structure. So I want to make sure that we do have those channels of communication in place. I think ideally, if those aren't working the way that we would like them to work, and we find out about it as a school board, we can provide input into, to the superintendent, who can then share that input with the folks that report into him. I definitely like the ideas that Ms. Chu Wong mentioned about having, town halls and other opportunities for discussion to occur, because I agree that the school board meetings don't seem to be effective in that regard.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai.
Enabling shared decision-making is crucial to me and part of my campaign platform. So when I talk about trust and transparency, it's about making sure that people not only feel heard, but that their voices feel valued. And in decision-making, this is critical that folks know what decisions are being made, what is the timeline for those decisions, who are the decision makers, what are the points for input, and then just as critically, once a decision is made, how can folks give feedback and what are the points for course correction? So this can play out a number of different ways. I can tell the story of when I served on the ad hoc school board committee for childcare. I thought that was a great example of where I and another, was one of just a couple parents on the board along with teachers, principals, board members, et cetera, really came together to address a problem of how to expand aftercare options in our district. We came up with a great solution, implemented it, and so I think there's a lot of room for different voices to be heard. I think we should be taking advantage of the expertise, the experience, the passion in our district and involve folks.
Thank you. Ms. Chu.
I'm always very disappointed when parents come when I'm a community leader, like in my role as a PTA president, and they say that their perception of the school board is that they do have this top-down approach. I think this was never clearer than when I was advocating last year for Aloni Room 19, where they felt that that was a decision that was made in a non-transparent way that broke a great deal of trust. So what I would love to do as a school board member is to rebuild that trust. I do think some of the ideas that have been expressed around this table are a good idea about building community dialogue and having two-way consensus with the community. But I think I want to make a point that as much as community forums, smaller community dialogues, smaller forums, and town hall events are an environment where people in the community can come forward, I think it's important not only to passively wait for members to come to us, but also to actively seek out voices that are underrepresented.
Thank you. I will now turn over the questions to our student moderators. Karen will ask the next set of questions. Please go ahead, Karen.
You will have 1.5 minutes to answer this question. Mental health and wellness is a district priority. What substantive policies and practices involving mental health care services will you specifically champion? We'll start with Ms. Chu.
As a sexual assault survivor and a suicide survivor with a very public story about depression, mental health, and suicide, it is obviously one of my top priorities to pay attention to this in the district. I would say that my specific policies, drawn from my background as an advocate for youth mental health issues globally, are to look at underlying complex and nuanced causes that can go into depression and suicide. I think often we look too narrowly at circumstantial reasons within the immediate vicinity. But one of the things that I would go back to look at is background, culture, roots where a student comes into the district and I would focus particularly on mental health issues earlier in the system, for example, in preschool, in elementary. I think so much attention has been paid to student depression in middle and high. We don't look at what is happening with younger children and look at the sort of core roots, the deeper roots that may lead to difficulties later on in a school career.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you so much. I think one of the most important things we can do to help in terms of some of the mental health challenges that we're facing in our district is to start early. I think one of the sources of stress and anxiety that I've certainly heard about from my high school student has to do with a behavior that students start in middle school of comparing their grades with one another after tests and quizzes. It doesn't necessarily sound like that big a deal, but if you think about the effect of having that happen over and over and over again, some students feeling like they didn't do as well as they wanted to, other students saying, oh, that quiz or test was easy, I think I got 100. You can start to appreciate how some of these sort of smaller things that are cultural and that start, as early as elementary or middle school can have a big impact once you get into high school where the stakes are higher. So I think it's very important that we also start to include more narratives in our community about what types of pathways are open to students, helping students to realize that it's okay to be different, it's okay to have challenges, it's okay to take non-traditional paths. Making sure that students really internalize that messaging is important. I think we also do need to address cell phones in the classroom. There's no question that social media is having a negative impact on our students, and we've got to figure out how to start to rein that in.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Chu Wong.
Improving mental health and wellness is one of the priorities that I'm running on, and I have a lot of ideas for ways that we can improve it that start with parent education about what is age and development appropriate and what they don't need to worry about. I know that the culture of stress that we talk a lot about in high school and whether middle schoolers are prepared to go to high school, that is all trickling down. I saw it when I was a buddy at our incoming kinder night in Ohlone when I had parents asking, but what if my child's behind in math and they haven't even started kindergarten? So we need to have, I think, parent education about what to expect, because times have changed and it's different than when we went to school. But I think most importantly, we need to be supporting students in what they want to do for each other. We just had an amazing AAPI Intergenerational Conversations event that was put on by the Palo student body in partnership with the Asian American Foundation. It was well attended, it was student driven, and because it was student driven, I believe it was more impactful. So in addition to us doing things to try to address mental health and wellness as a district, I think we need to empower our students and uplift their voices because they're the ones experiencing it every day on their campuses.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Colohan.
So as a board member, I have to quite frankly admit, I'm not a mental health expert, but I do care deeply about our kids and their wellness. And so the first thing I would do is I'd talk to the professionals we have in the district. We have hired an amazing team of professionals who are dealing with our kids on a daily basis, and they're working with them both through the wellness centers and a counseling basis, also doing in-classroom programs. And they know our kids so well, I would talk to them and say, how can we support you better? How can we make sure you guys get everything you need in order to make sure that our kids are doing their absolute best? And so I would fully support, like Nicole said, the student-led conversation that was held last Tuesday, the AAPI session, was fantastic. And yeah, so that's what I would do, is I would basically ask the pros and follow their excellent advice.
Thank you. Next, and finally, Ms. Kamai.
So I talked about one of my priorities being community and trust. Another one is safety, which includes investing in mental health services. Our district has made a lot of great strides in taking mental health very seriously. As talked about, there was this great event this week, but there's still a lot more that we could do. And so 3 specific policy proposals. One is that I think this has to be a community-wide solution, that the district works also with the city, with other leaders, with faith-based leaders, with other local leaders, so that we're addressing this as a community, because it is not a school problem, it is a community problem. Second, I think that we should be building in more flexibility for our students in terms of courses that they can change or even walk out of. My daughter was telling me there's a policy at Green that you can go to the library at any point of the day if you need to. This does not have a stigma associated with it. You can just take a break. So those kinds of things to offer our children ways to leave that are not necessarily even associated with mental health, but might be the break that they need. Third, I think we need meaningful input from students. So we do have surveys. My understanding is that not everybody fills them out, and some that do fill them out do not fill them out honestly. So we need to figure out a way to get meaningful input from students so that we are hearing from students where the stressors are and where we can intervene. It could be that there are a whole bunch of different reasons, and we could address all of those and have different responses for different points.
Thank you. The next question, again, you will have 1.5 minutes to answer this question. Is the district doing enough to support the diverse academic needs of all students, from high-achieving students to those struggling to meet standards? What specific classes or programs could be added or broadened to better support the spectrum of student achievement? We'll start with Ms. Kamai.
So talking about my third priority, then, so we talked about community trust, we talked about safety, and the third one is opportunities for all. So no, I do not believe that we are doing enough to address the diverse academic needs of our students. I think that we could be doing more to help our struggling students, providing more support for folks earlier on so that we are actually enabling folks to not fall too far behind. If they do fall far behind, finding ways for them to meaningful catch up. We are a well-resourced district, and we should be having everybody performing at grade level or above. I also believe we are not doing enough to challenge our advanced students. When I go knocking on doors, there are a lot of folks that tell me their kids are bored in school. This is not just one person, these are many folks. We need to be providing clear communication to our families about what the advanced pathways are so that those kids can access advanced classes and make sure that we offer advanced classes within the bell schedule. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Mr. Colohan.
So I'm going to touch the third rail and talk about math. You see, I've got a PhD in computer science. I finished grade 26. I love math. And so as a result, I've been hearing from a lot of parents about math in our school district. And I've also been looking at a lot of the data. One of the areas I want to touch math is at the elementary level. If you look at our 5th grade CASP scores, currently 19%, roughly 1 in 5 students, is not at grade level by the time they finish grade 5. Roughly 49% of our socioeconomically disadvantaged students are, 51% are not at grade level, 49% are. And so, yeah, I've seen this as an educator in the middle school when I've been substitute math teaching. You get some students who just know all the answers and are racing ahead, and you get other students who are struggling, who don't know simple questions like, what is 6 times 7? And so, as a result, we need to find ways of supporting students at all levels. We need to make sure that our acceleration pathways are clear. We need to make sure that at the advanced levels, we have the ability for students who love math to grow and to be constantly challenged and do fun and exciting things so that they can love math the same way that I loved it and I stuck in school for so long. And so, yeah, I think effectively, we need to make it really clear what opportunities are there. And I can also point out that when I've subbed for 12th grade math classes, some of the kids taught me things I've never been exposed to. And it's kind of cool.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Chu.
I do think we're a district of diverse academic needs. I don't believe that we are currently meeting the needs of all of our students. And therefore, my first priority in my campaign is every child must grow. And I interpret this to mean appropriate academic placement for children across the district. I think certainly we do need to focus our resources on support for struggling students, and that might mean additional math specialists, additional reading specialists, and perhaps after school homework support, further homework support for that. But we also need support for accelerated students. It is not enough to say that we will allow our accelerated students to thrive, but we must give them places where they can thrive and where excellence can be celebrated without shame. There's been a lot of controversy around the access to multivariable calculus. And I support the idea that students who are passionate about any particular subject, be it multivariable calculus or ballet or piano or baseball, in all these things, we should be encouraging our students to thrive across a range of interests, which include maths but are not limited to maths.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Ms. Chu Wong.
Math and. There are so many courses that our students want. I've heard from students that have to take an online class to take AP US government, and that's something that they need to show on their transcript to be able to apply to the programs they want in college. There are always going to be more programs or more classes that students want, and I think it's going to be impossible to have all of them during a single school day and be able to offer them or to have teachers to teach them. We rely on teachers to bubble up what courses they want to teach, and we need to make sure that those classes also feel accessible. For example, there was an Asian American literature class that I heard from students that wanted to take but felt that they couldn't because it wasn't an AP, and so, you know, what good was it even going to do for them if they took it, even though they were interested? So we need to think about all the unintended consequences of offering more. Sometimes we have to balance mental health and wellness and allowing students to make choices that are hard. We can't just bulldoze choices away and say you can have everything you want, because the reality is we are a public school district. We need to be able to serve all of our students, and we need to allow our students to make those choices about what interests them and what they want to pursue, and make sure they have the opportunity to do so. And there are many opportunities, so we need to communicate those opportunities better and then allow our students to make choices for themselves.
Thank you. Finally is Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you. So in short, no, I don't think the district is doing enough to support all of our students. And I think that's the case at both ends of the spectrum in terms of students that are struggling to meet grade level standards, and also students who are ready to take on advanced academic opportunities that we might not expect for the grade level that they're in. I think it's really important that we provide opportunities for all of our students. And I think I just want to mention that I don't buy into the idea that advanced academic opportunities are you know, on one end of a balance with mental health being on the other end. I think that the research actually shows that providing more opportunities for students helps them to feel empowered and feel like they're valued, and that they're able to, you know, explore the interests that they have. And so I think it's important for us to keep that in mind when we're having conversations about this. I think it's also important for us to look at our surrounding districts and recognize if we're out of step with districts that are similar to us in important ways. And to me, that implies that we should be exploring bringing back or making more available courses that have become harder to access recently, and that might include multivariable calculus. I also think it's important that we support our teachers if we're going to ask them to teach a wide range of students.
Thank you. For the next question, you will have 1.5 minutes to respond. Please choose one of these questions to answer. Please share an example of advocacy you have pursued with PAUSD, or share an example of an issue before the board where you would have pursued a different governance solution and why. We'll start with Ms. Chu Wong.
I believe that the English language curriculum adoption that we did in 2022 is something that I would have handled differently. We had a committee of teachers and stakeholders that said that they needed more time to pilot different courses and curriculums, and they weren't ready to make a recommendation. But because that's the framework, is that you make a recommendation, ultimately, a smaller subset within that committee made a recommendation and the board approved it. I understand that there are always certain requirements we have to follow, and there could be creative ways to follow them. Well, for example, we could have officially adopted to continue on the broad scale the existing curriculum that existed while continuing to pilot for another year so that our teachers felt like they got more buy-in from other teachers, because that's ultimately the most important thing, because those teachers are the ones that are going to have to be implementing the curriculum in the room. room. And so I would have done that differently in pushing back and saying, okay, let's make sure we have something that's going to work for the next year. Will we buy more time to consider what our teachers are telling us so that we have teacher buy-in and we have a curriculum that our people are happy with, because we are going to commit to this for several years. So that is something that I would have done differently from the current board.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Kamai.
So I can talk about advocacy that I did. So 2 years ago, when we received a decision that the 4th and 5th grade would no longer be offered in aftercare options through Kids Choice and Kids Club across our elementary school sites. I was one of the impacted families. I reached out, organized families at Escondido, then was in touch with other schools who were impacted by this decision as well, started attending board meetings, wrote to board members to really explain the impact that these decisions were going to have on our kids actually still really within the pandemic. Then I became part of the decision making. So I was somebody that was impacted by the decision, organized around it, and then applied to be part of the decision-making body, the ad hoc school board committee that provided a recommendation to the board. It was during that process that sitting at that table where I thought, gosh, this is a table I want to be at. I think I have something to offer as a lawyer. I think I have something to offer as somebody that does policy as my day job. Listening to stakeholders, bringing folks together, and coming up with a solution. We now continue to offer 4th and 5th grade at all of our elementary school sites for PAC and Kids Choice right at schools there as well. We preserved all of the providers while expanding options for English as a second language, special needs, foster care, and low-income youth. So I think that's an attitude and an experience I would like to bring to the board as we're faced with certain decisions. How do we make sure we make the pie bigger and not that we're cutting services for our families?
Thank you. Next is Mr. Saltzman.
One decision that the board made within the last several years impacted the way that math instruction occurs in our middle schools. What we've done is we've moved from a system where we had multiple different lanes that were available to different students into a system where we have effectively one lane per grade. So every student in 6th grade is taking 6th grade math, for example. I think that this decision in and of itself was not necessarily problematic, but the results that we've seen so far indicate to me that we haven't fully addressed the needs of all of our students because we have many students who are not succeeding in their algebra classes in 8th grade. So what this tells me is that either there's a problem with the way that we've delaned math in the middle schools, or we haven't provided appropriate support for all of our students so that our teachers can be successful in teaching all of our different students. So whether that means that we need to provide them with additional classroom aids, some sort of technology solution or something else, I think we do need to look at the way that we're currently handling math in the middle school and make some changes.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Chu.
I'd like to talk about a case which brought my global advocacy on a local platform, which is my advocacy work for Loney Room 19, the Modzavir Learning Center. This is how I entered local politics. When the question asks, what would I have done differently? In that case, 8 families at Loney were informed by email that their Modzavir Learning Center was going to close at the end of that academic year. I think that it was a mistake to inform 8 families by email a decision of such a momentous decision that was going to affect all of their families so profoundly. I think I would have, if I had any say in it, I would have liked to have seen greater consultation with families. But although that initial email was pretty harsh in terms of how it was received, I think that it was still a situation that we could have dialed back on. So as a Loney PTA president at the time, together with these families, we went from board member to board member to try to have our concerns heard and our needs taken seriously. And I was really surprised, because I was new to local politics at the time, that I felt that our needs were stonewalled and that we were very much pushed into taking legal action as the only solution. I feel that that is an unfortunate consequence, and I think there were many paths to get there other than legal action. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Colahan.
Early in the pandemic, I was a co-president of Dubnik PTA, and the whole district was facing the tough decision of what do we do about reopening our schools? And the district put out a survey to the entire parent population and got back some results. And the district was telling us, oh yeah, parents are overwhelmingly in favor of reopening. And I heard that and I'm like, that doesn't jibe with what I'm hearing at all. As a matter of fact, every single parent I talked to was telling me, yeah, we should reopen eventually, but not yet. We don't know enough about this disease to know, should we reopen right now? And so I'm like, this is baffling to me that the district is taking this position. And so what I did is me and my fellow co-president, who happened to also be named Chris, we worked very hard to devise a survey of our families. We tried very hard to make sure that our survey was unbiased as possible. We didn't want to be creating a push-pull. And we asked a whole bunch of questions, which the district survey didn't ask, such as, when do you want to reopen? What makes you comfortable? What makes you not comfortable? What do you want to see in place? And we sent the survey out, and we got a very different result than both what the district had and also than what I expected. The results we got back was we learned that 40% of our families at Duvnek were strongly in favor of reopening, and only 60% were what I was hearing from in my isolated bubble. So based on this new data, I changed my mind on what the appropriate policy was, and I went and I presented this data to the district at the board meeting so that they could hear this voice as well.
Thank you. I'll be handing over the next set of questions to my other student moderator, Luke.
You will have 1 minute to answer the next questions. The new ethnic studies requirements and curriculum have aroused considerable interest and concern in the community. What is your view of the curriculum PAUSD is developing, and what should the adoption process look like? We'll be starting with Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you. So I believe that ethnic studies can be an incredibly powerful and important part of our curriculum, and I'm looking forward to when we do have ethnic studies incorporated into our curriculum. I also think it's great that we are currently piloting an ethnic studies curriculum in our high schools, and I look forward to hearing more about the pilot program, and I applaud Superintendent Austin for having moved back the date for evaluation of that curriculum, or I'm sorry, of those pilot programs until January. I think it definitely makes sense to wait until the pilot has concluded to evaluate the success of the program. I think it's very important that we ensure that we are teaching ethnic studies in an inclusive way and not a way that makes any of our students feel unsafe, unheard, or unvalued.
Thank you. Ms. Chu?
Similarly to my fellow candidate, it is of course an incredibly controversial issue, and I would concur that whilst it is very important that we have ethnic studies in our classroom, I do think we need to be very careful about its implementation. I am a supporter of an inclusive curriculum, one that presents a complex historical narrative in as neutral a way as possible without bias. And of course, I would be very concerned about any curriculum that causes any section of our student body to feel unsafe in school. I think student safety and I think a greater lens on hate speech and hate crime is very important. And so consequently, I would be concerned to look at this curriculum very carefully to make sure that no political agendas enter our education spaces or our classroom spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colahan?
So I think it's important when you're talking about ethnic studies to talk about the reason why we are introducing this curriculum into our schools. When I've been substitute teaching, I've noticed that often in our classrooms, friend groups are sorted by ethnic groups, and sometimes there's teasing across friend groups. And sometimes this teasing is racially motivated, which is awful. That's what leads to Title IX complaints and to district having to deal with such incidents. And quite frankly, the purpose of an ethnic studies class is to teach our students empathy, the ability to put themselves in the shoes of someone else who's in a different life situation, who has a different background, and really truly understand where they're coming from and how they feel when they interact with you. And so because of this, I think it's vitally important that we roll out an ethnic studies program that teaches empathy. It doesn't have to be inclusive, doesn't have to be liberated. It has to be somewhere in the middle. And I support our teachers in how they've chosen to treat this topic with care.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai?
I think teaching ethnic studies is important, but I think it's really important to be very purposeful and conscientious about the way in which we do it and the curriculum that we choose. As I mentioned, one of my priorities is safety, and that includes making sure that every child feels safe at school and like they belong. And we need to be very purposeful about how we teach this class and get input on it. I think there are two concerns. One is that the material is not put together thoughtfully and in fact is more divisive and does the opposite of the goal, which is to bring us together on our shared values. The other concern is that it's a nothing class, that we miss an opportunity to really bring us together and talk about substantive experiences that will help all of us learn the diverse backgrounds that we are fortunate to have in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Chu Wang?
This is not just an important class, it is vital. Studies have shown that historically underrepresented students that are given the opportunity to take ethnic studies improve academically across the board in all of their academic courses. I will tell you that as someone who is a biracial Asian American female, when I took ethnic studies in college and decided to major in Asian American studies and women's studies, it is when I gained a better perspective of my place in the world and a confidence of my ability to contribute. And it is absolutely necessary because the history books we have do not show us people that look like me or many of our students. This is absolutely necessary. Ethnic studies has been something we have taught in our district for over a decade without issue. I trust our teachers. I trust the curriculum that we have had, and I trust this to be a starting point for us to capitalize on this opportunity to make sure that we're serving all of our students with ethnic studies by creating standards and opening it up to the community to talk about the standards for what ethnic studies should be. But absolutely, we cannot delay. We need ethnic studies. We are not using either of the controversial curriculums proposed by the state. It's going to be great in Palo Alto.
Thank you. You will now have 1.5 minutes to answer this next question. What do you see as the greatest challenge for the district's budget? What philosophy would you bring to the budget process? We'll be starting with Mr. Colohan.
So, as far as the community is concerned, I'd say the greatest challenge is understanding what the heck is in that budget. Took me 2 weeks to read the entire 120-page SACS document and understand every line of it. And quite frankly, that's kind of ridiculous. I know it's easier if you read the audit report and you read the explanations. I've read those too. That's what actually helped me understand the whole thing. But the top-level version of our budget is that 87% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. Okay, so that means that basically the budget is dominated by people. And so this is something which I've been ranting about for a while, which is the budget doesn't really clearly break down how many people we have in each role in the district, which means it's difficult to have budget conversations about, are we making the right investments? Do we have the right number of aides, librarians, teachers, principals, admins? What is our balance of administrative staff to teaching staff? And is it the right balance? It's kind of hard to tell from looking at what's in that budget. And so I'm actually kind of thankful that I think maybe partially because I've been ranting about this publicly for a while, the district in the last board meeting actually made a special presentation breaking down how much money they're spending on certain important classes of people and also on and how many of those people we have and the great work that they're doing. I want to see this go further. I want to see a complete breakdown of all of the people in our district and also historical trends so that we can really understand what we're doing and why.
Thank you. Ms. Chu Wang?
Could you repeat the question? Thank you.
Of course. What do you see as the greatest challenge for the district's budget? What philosophy would you bring to the budget process?
We've talked a lot about the reserve tonight, and I think understanding fully why certain things remain in the reserve is really important because we do have a very large reserve. It's my understanding that some is reserved in case certain events occur or for future budgeted items. So we need to, I think, because there has been so much controversy around the reserve, we need to be very clear about what we need to have in there. For example, there's certain funding that is required to be in the reserve. The same thing for understanding what restricted buckets of funding that we have. So I think that there almost needs to be a level of transparency that I believe we've tried to provide, but could continue to do better in terms of the community understanding where the money is set aside for, where it is restricted, where it is being used, because we will be coming to the community to ask them to pass another bond measure to fund the schools some more. And so they need to understand the way that we're using our budget, and this needs to be a thing that is absolutely transparent.
Thank you. Ms. Kamhai?
I think the biggest challenge to the budget is that we have a projected deficit. And so I think what we need to be doing is monitoring that to make sure that we are able to address it. As was said at the last board meeting, we need to make sure that we don't overreact, but also make sure that we do not underreact either. In the past, our property tax revenue has traditionally come in higher than projected. So it hopefully will be the case that that will continue to happen and will address the projected deficit. But I think that that's the number one issue that we need to be looking out for. And if it does, in fact, end up at a deficit, that we're not caught by surprise and are able to make very purposeful and informed decisions with input about what to cut.
Thank you. Ms. Chu?
I agree with my fellow candidates about the concerns about reserve and deficit, but I would also like to raise something else. Since such a large part of the budget goes to salary and benefits, the school district really is a people business, and therefore the retention of those people, the satisfied retention of good people in particular, is deeply important. I think that Palo Alto, as a school district, traditionally has had very low churn, but I see that changing in recent times with low morale, both among teachers and also among classified staff. I want to say that our human resources are our most critical resources, and the school district wouldn't be where it is without valuing teachers and our classified staff. And therefore, I think as a board member, I would like to take a good long look at why there is low morale, find out and propose some very practical solutions to raise morale. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Just to pick up a little bit on what Ms. Chu was saying, I think that given that our budget is in many ways a reflection of our values, I think it is very important that we take a look at how we can make sure that we're expressing our values properly in the budget. And given that such a large portion of it is allocated to people, is making sure that we can use that amount in the most effective way possible to support our teachers, support our classified staff, and make sure that we're really putting the priority on those folks. I think it's also important that we understand that the current projected deficit spending is partly by design. It's to help us spend down the reserves that we have. If we weren't spending, if we weren't engaging in some deficit spending, then we wouldn't be able to spend down those reserves. So I just don't want anybody who's watching to panic. And I think it is also very important that we think about, how we use our budget effectively going forward in the future as we consider what the future of public education might need to look at, as we think about impacts on society from artificial intelligence, for example. So we want to make sure that we have flexibility in our budget. I think that's something that that's really important for the future.
Thank you. You'll now have 1 minute to answer the next questions. What should be the timeline for the final decision on Coverly, and what should be the optimal outcome for the district? We're starting with Ms. Chu.
I think the feeling in the community is that the decision about Coverly has dragged on for far longer than it should have. So in terms of a specific timeline, I'd like to say as soon as possible, but I understand that there are a lot of complexities between the city and the school district in terms of specifically what to do with the land and whether more of the land is going to be allocated to the city than the school district is currently happy with. Whilst I'm not privy to the complexities, despite spending many hours talking to people involved directly directly in the negotiations, I think it's still a very complex issue. And so it is an issue I hope to have greater visibility into. And I would say, in terms of answering the question of an optimal solution for the school district, I think I'd like to take a step back and say the optimal solution for the community at large, which includes both City Council and school district, is that we come to an agreement where Cubberley can be developed in a way that benefits all of the community, both children within the school district and community members at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Yeah, I agree that this has gone on for a very long time, and when I talk to people in the community, they are very frustrated, especially folks that live near Cubberley, because they've been hoping to have a community center built there for a long time. And I think that we need to make sure, the next iteration of this board works collaboratively with the folks on the City Council. We've got to figure out how to get past the impasse that's existed for far too long. We cannot have another cycle of analysis and recommendations. We need to come up with some creative solutions. And I personally, if I'm elected, look forward to engaging in those conversations and trying to be creative for something that will be a win-win for both the schools and for the community at large.
Thank you. Ms. Chu Wang?
I am someone that lives close to Cubberley and is at Cubberley 5 days a week. My youngest goes to the preschool run in Greendale, where I work one morning a week. My office for my actual job is at Cubberley. I see my neighbors at Cubberley that are vital services for our students and community members and the elderly. We have churches that operate out of there. We have art programs, music programs. We have our program for our special ed students after they finish high school that is located there, as well as our special ed caseworkers and adapted PE. Very important functions are all at Cubberley. And if you take a quick tour around, you will see that Cubberley is dilapidated. And again, if we think about what our budget says about our values, it's not a pretty picture. So I think all of us agree that something needs to be done at Cubberley, and it is this underutilized resource, and I am in favor of doing a deal with the city whereby as much of the land as we feel that the district can responsibly do a deal with the city, a land swap, whatever, we need to do it so that something can be done with this important piece of community property.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai?
So this is something I've been talking about a lot with different stakeholders. It is something that community members, to echo fellow candidates here, bring up. I think we need to resolve this as soon as possible. It's taking up too much airtime. And in the meantime, our community does not have the potentially great community center that I hope that we get out of this. So I am honored to be endorsed by several current council members as well as prior council members, and this is a conversation I've had with almost all of them, is how do we work together to resolve this in a quick way that is something that will result in the community getting a center that it needs, while recognizing that there are a lot of existing tenants there that need a place to go. So figuring out what the priorities are for our community to address many of the services that are being offered there right now. So I am not privy to the negotiations that I know are ongoing, but as board member, would really come in with an open mind about how to represent our constituency's wishes and get this resolved. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Colohan?
To the first part of your question, when should this be resolved? Well, ideally last year, but ideally before the election, because that way we won't have to deal with it, which would be fantastic. But if we do have to deal with it, we need to keep in mind all of the things that we want out of any potential deal. We want to have the ability to have a future school built, because we're building a massive amount of housing in this city. And hopefully that means we're going to turn around our enrollment numbers and have increasing enrollment to deal with sometime in the next 4 to 8 years. We need to make sure that we reserve space for important sports activities, because we need sports fields for our kids to play and to grow. We need desperately a community center in that part of town. And so we've got the land, we should be able to build it. And we also need more housing. And if we can find a way of doing all of the above plus housing as well, that'd be fantastic as well. I am totally flexible on how we get to these goals, and I just am incredibly supportive of let's get it done.
All right. For the next set of questions, I'll be handing it back to Karen.
Again, you will have 1 minute to answer this question. More than 50% of students walk or bike to school. What more needs to be done to ensure a safe commute? We'll start with Ms. Kamai.
So one of my campaign platforms is safety, which includes bike safety. It's something that I care deeply about. My daughter bikes to school every day. My son bikes to school every day. My husband bikes to work. I bike. So there's a lot of biking in our family and what we see. And there was a child in my daughter's class who was hit last year. We didn't have crossing guards in front of Escondido. And thanks to hers and others advocates, now we do. So this is something that I think is critical to our children's well-being. I think it's wonderful that we have so many kids that bike, but we need to make sure that our children are safe. So one thing that I would want to do is continue to work with the safe routes and others. There's been a new position founded, the Palo Alto PTA Council on safe routes that now has a representative every school. So working with them to see what we can do in partnership with the city and other organizations to continue the work to get rid of certain rights on red, which has been happening already, and make these corridors where kids are safer to bike, and also making sure that there are classes to help educate our kids about the rules of the road.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Colahan.
So, I'm an avid cyclist. I'd be happy to show you my Strava profile where I bike over 1,000 miles a year. I love biking, and I also encourage my kids to bike. It's how they get to school. And the thing which I would do as a board member is I'd support the existing program we have, which is Safe Routes to School, which is actively working to improve the cycling infrastructure in our city. And it's actually, if you go to one of their meetings, it's pretty amazing. It's a nice combination of, you'll see police officers there, you'll see people from the city utilities department, or facility, the folks who design the streets are there. You have parents there, you have PTA representatives there, you even have school principals who attend this meeting in order to really understand what's going on with their kids and opportunities to make things better. And then, working through the bureaucracy to get things done. So, as a board member, I would fully support this program and make sure they got what they needed in order to keep on making our city a safer place.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Chu.
I'm also the parent of 4 kids, all of whom either bike or walk to school, so it's also an issue that is very close to my heart. I would say that one of the things I would love to see more of is bike safety training for more than just 4th grade. We have an amazing 4th grade bike rodeo, but among my 4 kids, sometimes 4th grade is a long way away for the 10th grader and even for the 7th grader. And I see that as kids move through the system, they are sleeping more, they are more rushed, they have more pressure with homework, and so they're rushing to school. And sometimes the teen decision-making isn't at its best. I would agree that we have excellent safety schemes already around bike training, around bike lanes, traffic lights, stop signs, crossing guards. We've done an awful lot to make bike safety improved in this district, but despite that, I would say not to the diminishment of these schemes, but even one accident is too much. And so I would recommend a combination of more creative schemes and supplemental schemes on the things that we already have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Saltzman.
I'm glad this question came up. I'm also an avid cyclist and definitely encourage my kids to ride their bikes. And it is a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes riding around our city, unfortunately. And I think that there are a couple things that we can potentially do to make the situation safer. I think we should be considering more physical separations. I think it's great that we have well-marked bike lanes. And I think that the Safe Routes to Schools program is fantastic, and we definitely should be expanding it. I also agree that we should, invest more resources into educating our kids about how to bike safely. But the problem is even with doing all of those things, we still have the potential for accidents. And part of the reason why is because we have cars that are riding too close to cyclists in some cases with no physical barrier. So I would be interested in ways that we can add some additional safety measures like that.
Thank you. Finally is Ms. Chu Wong.
I think bike and pedestrian safety is a great example of how our city and our schools work really well together with Safe Routes to School, which has been mentioned. I know for our family, whenever we can get up early enough, we bike with both of our our children, even our 4-year-old, to school. It's something that I think is really great and really empowering for them as one day they'll bike on their own. I want to make sure that in addition to looking at physical separation, we continue to promote education. We do have the bike rodeo. I know Cyfrets to School brought the bike rodeo to preschool family and talked about it with parents of 2, 3, 4-year-olds. Then that happened at Greendale and was really great and is a tradition we're continuing. I want to do a special plug for Bike Palo Alto is having their bike fair, which is open to all ages. It just happens to be held at Fair Meadow. I believe it is from 1 to 3 p.m. on October 5th. So everybody please go. And I'll tell you, I went last year, even without my kids, and it was super fun. And they made it engaging, and they talked about helmet fittings and bike tune-ups, and they provided a really fun experience where students can learn about bike safety, and so can the whole family.
Thank you. For the next question, you will have 1.5 minutes to answer. According to the district's 2023 to 24 annual report, 15.8% of high school students aren't college and career ready. What can be done to improve student readiness? We'll start with Ms. Chu Wong.
I think the most important thing we can do to improve college and career readiness is encourage our students to be finding and pursuing and exploring their passions. We've got a great career technical education program. We've got different pathways. I think that if we can do something to reduce the culture of pressure where students feel crowded out, that they have to take the most APs and not necessarily the classes that interest them, or where they're not aware of the option to do things like work study, where they can actually find out what a career is like. When they're more focused on the academic arms race and their perfect GPAs and SATs and taking a ton of APs, they lose out on that opportunity to be college and career ready beyond grades and coursework. And so I think it's important we continue to have things like the Career Speaker Series at Palo, at which I spoke and talked about how I've transitioned careers from being a lawyer to going technical and learning how to code and starting a business and now running a nonprofit, because we need to show our students so they can internalize that there's a lot of different pathways to success.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Chu.
Although this is rhetorical because I know I can't do this, but I'd actually like to ask for more clarity around that question, because I think 15% of students not being college ready could refer to many things. Does that mean academically? Does that mean socially? Does that mean culturally? You know, there are lots of questions that we could ask about this. I want to refer to my own life experience. I might have counted, I was a straight A student. Bound for either Oxford or Cambridge. I would say that I fell, though, within that 15% of students that wasn't college ready. I wasn't ready socially, I wasn't ready culturally. And I was one of the students who was sent away on a gap year, where I got to do lots of other things other than study. I got to start a small business, I got to travel the world, and I got to really discover myself. And I think that this experience, before I went to college, enabled me to think about life much more holistically, and to consider that there were multiple pathways to success, and that discover interests that I didn't perhaps discover in the strict rigor of school. And so I would agree that one of the ways of looking at life after primary and secondary education is that there's a very big world out there with many different ways to get to success, and that college is only one of them. And when our ability as a school district to educate students to think about this at an earlier stage, not just in the pressure of those junior, senior years, would benefit greatly both the students' creativity in the pathways they find forward and the mental health as they go towards that crush that is college applications.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Callahan.
So first off, I want to reiterate, we actually have, as Evan mentioned before, some amazing CTE pathways in our high schools. And perhaps we can do even more than we're already doing with some of the wonderful CTE fairs and stuff to promote these to our kids, so they can learn about the many ways which we can learn new topics and new ideas and new loves of things they want to learn in high school. We already have partnerships with local employers to have career placements, and those, I've heard, work rather well for the students who participate in them. And we also have partnerships with Foothills College. We've got the College Now program. We also have the Middle College program. And those are other options which we have to try and help our kids get into a place where they're actually doing something which they're passionate about. And this really comes back to one of my planks of my campaign, which is I want all of our kids in our schools to learn to love learning. And so in order to have that happen, we need to offer many educational opportunities to them so that they can find the thing they're really great and they're really passionate about.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Kamai.
So I would address this in three ways. One is earlier intervention to make sure that we're identifying students who are not performing at grade level or may have different barriers to opportunities, and making sure that we are trying to provide support as early as we can and in different subjects. Two, I think we want to address this from a community-wide perspective so that we are doing parent education and outreach and promoting all of the different options that we have, because we have a diverse group of students and community members who have different desires, skills, and goals. And third, I think the optionality of the programs we already do have could be really promoted and celebrated. I know my colleagues here have already talked about some of them, about pathways, about our certificate programs. So really expanding those opportunities for kids and celebrating them and asking for input about what else might be desired for kids who are looking for non-traditional pathways.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I have to admit, I'm curious to understand how we're defining college and career ready. Are we talking about students who aren't ready for a 2-year college, a 4-year college, who aren't ready for, what type of career? Are these issues that have to do with completion of requirements? Is this an issue of a lack of knowledge, of skills? So I think it is really important that we try to understand, how we're defining college and career readiness, make sure that that aligns with our community's expectations, that aligns with our students' expectations and actually what their goals are in life. And so I think once we do that and look a little bit deeper, we'll start to understand how we can solve this problem, if it is in fact a problem. I definitely think that to the extent that we have students who aren't able to meet the goals that they've set for themselves, we need to figure out how we can better support them. And so I think that what Ms. Kamai said about early intervention, tiered support strategies, those are things that I think can be very effective in terms of making sure that our students stay on track in terms of their expectations for themselves.
Thank you. Again, you will have 1.5 minutes to answer the following question. How can the district better support families whose students are enrolled in programs at Cubberley and other special education classrooms? We'll start with Mr. Saltzman.
This is a really complicated question, which I can attest to because I do have a student who has an IEP. And I will say that from our experience as a family, we've had incredible support from the district. We've been really fortunate. We have an incredible one-on-one aide who works with Jack and allows him to be in a full inclusion classroom in 3rd grade. And we're so grateful for the support that he receives from the various aides, the speech therapists, occupational therapists, from a number of different support specialists. I think what's really critical is that the district does everything it can to proactively reach out to families and provide them with the information they need to navigate the process. The thing that's really tricky about figuring out whether your child has special needs and if they do, how to access services and supports is that I don't think the process is as clear as it could be. I would love to see there be, both from the district administration in sort of official channels, but also increasing unofficial channels through parent organizations, parent supports, to make sure that all families know, how to engage in the process in a way that's going to be best for their child.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Kamai.
So I think there are a couple of different ways that we could offer further support. One is I think that we could look into special ed teacher retention and aide retention. So my understanding is that while we have good, in general, teacher retention among special ed teachers and aides, we have a lot of turnover. So looking into see what is it that we as a district can do to try to retain those teachers and staff that we had to provide the resources and services that our students and our community need, and to offer stability in particular to those students. I think too, would echo providing just more transparency about the services that we offer, and 3, really trying to support parent education and supports in the way that we can. And that to me means visibility, making sure that we are really including our sites there and our students in all of our district-wide events. I know that there's been PTA forming and other things to just make sure that we are representing and those all of our voices are heard and included in our district-wide decisions.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Chu Wong.
I think the most important thing that we can do for our special ed students and families is take a hard look at what inclusion has meant in our district. I had the opportunity to do a simulation that a nonprofit here called Real 2E held, where they simulated what it would be like to try to read if you were dyslexic. And it was a group of adults that one acted as a teacher, and we went through this exercise and had papers where it would look like what it might look like to a student that's dyslexic. And it was incredibly eye-opening to understand that, especially when I've heard that studies show that if we teach all students to read the way we teach dyslexic students to read, it's actually good for the majority of students, not just the dyslexic students. So that's one example of a way in which we could modify how we handle all learning for all students. And so I feel like we've done inclusion in this mainstreaming way in which we invite special ed students into our classrooms and say, but you need to modify the way that you act by having an aid that helps you act a certain way. And we haven't done enough to make sure that our classrooms are truly inclusive, meaning that we change some of the ways that we do things to make these students feel welcome, and like they don't have to always constantly be policing themselves and have an aid to help them fit into this mold that they may never fit into. I feel that that is not true inclusion, and we should do better because it's actually good for all of our students in addition to those students that need the inclusion the most.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Callahan.
So first thing to clarify is, what do you mean by special education? Because special education is a really, really wide spectrum of things. It goes from students who have a lot of needs to those who have just need an accommodation, perhaps on test taking or something like that. And one size does not fit all in terms of solutions or what problems we're having. And so that's why I sort of don't really envy Yolanda Conway, since she's overseeing the whole program, because it's so huge and so complex. And yet we're in a position where right now Palo Alto apparently is doing it significantly better than many other school districts, because a lot of the parents I talk to have moved to Palo Alto because of how well we're handling our special education, even if we're not handling it nearly as well as we want to, or we expect of ourselves to handle it. I think it's really important that we support our teachers, and we support our teachers well, and we make them feel supported and have strong management. I hear we've had some challenges in the past, which is part of why we've had some turnover problems recently. And we also need to clearly define what our inclusion goals are, as Nicole touched on, because without clear goals, we're just chasing an arbitrary metric as opposed to trying to figure out exactly what inclusion techniques are best for the students who are participating in these programs. And so we don't want to just chase the metrics, but also make sure that we help our students.
Thank you. Finally is Ms. Chu.
I think if we took a step back and we asked special ed families how the district can better support students enrolled in special ed classes, both at Cubberley and otherwise, I think we might be met with some cynicism. Because frankly, the feeling I get from speaking to many special ed families, and including advocating for my own special ed student, is that the district that it's such a low bar, that the possibility of better supporting these families, that there's quite a lot to be done. For example, I spoke to several families recently who are outraged at the idea that a lot of the rhetoric in the district is about a district that serves K through 12, when really, if we take into account the special ed programs, it's actually a district that serves students aged 3 to 22. And they're very adamant that we should change the language about that, because that's a question of visibility. That might seem like a small matter of rhetoric, but In terms of the special ed parents, we're often confronted with a community of people that are exhausted, they feel invisible, they feel that they have to advocate extremely hard for the needs of their special ed kids, they feel that the district doesn't meet legal requirements, let alone empathy requirements.
Thank you. I'll be passing on the next set of questions back to Luke.
You will have 1 minute to answer the next questions. PAUSD has a history of sustainability work, including creating Fletcher Middle School Sustainability Choice Program. How would you build upon the work that's already been done? We'll be starting with Mr. Kolohan.
The short answer is I would support anyone who comes to me with great ideas. I have to admit, at this moment, I'm drawing a blank other than we should buy electric school buses, we should put in electric solar panels wherever, we should support the sustainability program at Fletcher and make sure we give it enough resources. If there's a waiting list, we should allow them to hire enough teaching staff into that program to get more people in the program. But yeah, this question's thrown me, and so now I'm just wool gathering.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Thanks so much for this question. This is an issue that I know is incredibly important to many people in our community, including our students. And in fact, when we talk about mental health, my understanding is that for many students, the concern about our environment and what type of planet they're inheriting from our generation and the generation that came before us, that is actually a source of significant stress. And I think that makes it really important that as a school district, we are aligning our practices with expectations around best stewardship of our planet. I think we can continue to try to partner with the city on sustainability initiatives. I think we continue to support initiatives in the schools in terms of education. And I think that as we can continue to convert more of our energy usage to green energy sources, we should be doing that. I also believe that we should have someone who's focused on sustainability district-wide, because I think that pays for itself.
Thank you. Ms. Chu?
As a Girl Scout leader who led a Girl Scout troop who did much work in the sustainability issues, I can concur that I think young teenagers and older teenagers today are very concerned about this as a social justice issue. I will say with my Girl Scout troop, we looked at very practical schemes for our schools, such as improving the way that waste is recycled, getting rid of plastics in school lunches, encouraging, obviously, families to bike and walk to school. But apart from what we can do as individual citizens, there are certainly, I believe, things that we can do as a district. We can look at the use in our property. As we redevelop property, we can look at ways in which property can be more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chu Wang?
There are individual actions that we can take and that can be encouraged through our schools and through education. And there's also big ticket items. I know electrifying school buses is something that we're all really interested in, and it costs a lot of money. There's also a white fleet of cars that we could talk about electrifying that would cost less money, so potentially we could do it sooner. We, I think, should look into solar panels and how do we reduce our carbon footprint. We should talk about ways in which we can have more sustainable food supply that comes into our school. And we have students that want to lead this initiative, which is so exciting. And then we can also talk about the education we provide to our students so that we have more things across our district like the Ohlone Farm in sustainable small-scale ways at all of our schools so our students can feel at all levels that they're having an impact on sustainability.
Thank you. Ms. Kemai?
So first I want to thank for any students listening, all the students that have reached out about this issue. It is not only the right thing to do to care about sustainability, but it is also clear that this is an issue that our students really care about. And also our community members care about, and that our city is also working very hard on. So I think it makes sense for us as a district to think more about how we can plug into those efforts that the city is doing, but also think within district staff how we can devote the necessary resources to ensure that somebody is thinking about sustainability at all times. So when we are looking into new contracts on building projects, when we are looking into appliances, when we are looking into really at at all stages of running the huge operation that is our district, that we are keeping sustainability in mind. And I think the best way to keep it in mind is to have someone who's really devoted to looking at everything from that lens. So I just want to say that it would be a priority for me. Thanks.
Thank you. You will have 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes, to answer the next questions. What is your view of the bipartisan Phone-Free School Act the California legislature passed in August? We're starting with Ms. Chu Wang.
I will take the fall and say that I am not fully up to speed on the Phone-Free School Act. I would hazard a guess that it is related to sustainability and most likely a good thing, but I don't like to speak on things that I'm not educated on. Oh, phone. I'm sorry. I thought you said foam free. Can I start over? Thank you. I'm so sorry. Did anyone else hear foam?
I did.
Okay.
Don't worry, you're not alone in that.
Sorry about that. Phone free. Yes, we have a lot. I've been hearing, and as I assume many of the other candidates have, that there's been a lot of discussion about phone free campuses. And from what I understand, we already have policies. I work with middle schoolers through my nonprofit, and I know that their phones are required to be in their lockers during the duration of the school day. And we have many teachers that are enforcing phone free classrooms. The unfortunate side effect of that is that it relies on teachers to be police of the phone situation. So I would like to see us utilize resources that other districts and states have, like New York and like Los Angeles Unified, where they have walked through this process. I also want student input because while certainly there are good uses of phones, there's also been a loss of social interaction. Teachers find it distracting. We don't need to make teaching any harder. So I want to make sure that we think about and engage students so that we are able to move forward with something where students also acknowledge that it's good for them as well as good for teachers and the entire school environment that we want to build. I also will say that although when I did my career speaker panel, they said no phones. I said, I want them to do phones because I'm going to do polls and have them engage. And I thought it was going to be great. And for the most part, it was. And then I found out a student made a fake Instagram account pretending to be me. And I realized very quickly that this is how students can bully and they can do it really fast. And so this is just one example of how, yes, they can be good. And we need to teach our students about the responsible ways to use them, whether they have them on campus or not.
Thank you. Ms. Chu?
I'm also very supportive of phone-free environments. I will say that as a family, we're actually a device-free household for our children up until the pandemic. And then, of course, the pandemic blew all that apart, as it did for very many families. And so I think I'm in favor of any schemes that can dial back the use of technology during the school day, because I think that school-age children have really lost a lot of the ability or the opportunity, really, to interact with one another as human beings, to play outside, to be creative. And so any schemes that would minimize, if not entirely eradicate the use of phones in school I would be very supportive of. I like the fact that in my daughter's middle school classroom, it is an honesty system. And indeed, actually in her high school classroom, it is an honesty system where there's a chart on the wall and you can check your phone into a pocket if you are present. I think the difficulty with middle school, where my oldest has now started, is at college, of course, is a different environment. And there we have 15-year-olds, and next year we'll have 14-year-olds operating in a college environment where the use of their phones can't be as policed. And I think that's a loophole that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colohan?
So unlike some of the other candidates, I'm not a lawyer, but I have actually attempted to read this law. And my understanding is what it does is it gives us the tools as a school district to set policies and enforce them in order to keep phones out of our classroom. And when I've worked as a substitute teacher, it has been amazing when you're subbing at the elementary or at the middle school level because the kids just basically don't have phones. I think I've caught a kid with a phone they weren't supposed to have once during my time teaching in those classes. So that's fantastic. At the high school level, it is a nightmare. When you walk into a class as a substitute teacher, you often don't know what the default policy is in the classroom, and the kids know that too. And so they just all have their phones out. They're constantly distracted. They do not do the work, or many of them do not do the work that they've been assigned because, they'd rather play with their phones. they are really good at taking the attention off of the classwork from the students. And I'd love for us to have a default policy of no phones in the classroom and where they're only accessible to students when a teacher explicitly says, this is valuable for an educational purpose, and I want you to bring your phones into the classroom at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
I think this is a really important issue for us to try to figure out an answer to. I am uncomfortable with the idea of outright bans. I prefer that we provide flexibility, and that includes flexibility for our staff and teachers as well as our students. But I think it's really important that we start as early as possible helping students understand the harm that is being done to them by the apps that are on their phones. The problem is really not the phone itself. The problem is the social media primarily that is on the phones. And I think that if we can help students understand the negative consequences that these apps have for them, and help them create good habits in terms of controlling their access to the devices themselves, they'll be in a better position to take those habits with them as they move forward in life. I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to just control things for them while they're in high school and then send them out into the world without having developed those skills to have the control themselves. But I do, however, think it's very important that we provide flexibility for our teachers, and they should be able to set their classroom as a phone-free zone if they want to. And there are good techniques for doing that, and I'm confident that, you know, if we provide them with the necessary support, they'll be able to do that. What I would love to see long-term is for us to get device makers and app makers to institute something like school mode. We have airplane mode. It's not clear to me why we can't geofence our schools and make sure that phones are just used as phones when they're there.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai?
So I've been talking about this when I talk about safety. I think it's clear, the evidence is clear that this is and can be a real mental health harm for folks, particularly at certain ages. And so I would be in favor of setting uniform expectations in our district of when cell phones are allowed and not allowed. So the expectations are there, and teachers are not having to police individually or make up their own guidelines. I know that there are bills out there. I know there's information today about Gavin Newsom in our state. So I do think this is on the horizon. And so for us, it will be determining how we approach this as a district, and I would be in favor of a district-wide policy with, of course, with caveats for folks who need cell phones for any medical or other devices that are reliant on cell phones, but that in general, they would not be in the classroom so that our children can really, and students can focus on interacting with each other, interacting, listening to the teacher, and having all of those really valuable interpersonal interactions within the school day.
Thank you. So that we can adjourn on time, this will be our last question, and candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond. What question do you wish we had asked in this forum that we didn't ask, and why? We'll be starting with Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I guess one question that's important for people to know is why are each of us running for school board? What motivated us to take this step? And so in my case, as I mentioned in my opening statement, it really comes back to my experience of having 3 kids who have very different needs in terms of how they would best be supported in school, what kinds of academic opportunities they might want to take advantage of. In fact, what their lives are likely to look like in the future. And I think for me, that has made it really, really apparent that as a school district, there's nothing more important in my mind than for us to figure out ways to treat each individual student as an individual, figure out what each individual child's strengths, challenges, interests, passions, what those things are, and then figure out ways to provide them with the best academic, social, and extracurricular activities to match up with their interests, strengths, challenges. I think that that will help us in terms of creating the next generation of participants in our society who are collaborative, who are caring, empathetic, and I think it will also help us a great deal in terms of mental health.
Thank you. Ms. Chu Wang?
I wish you had asked what are some things you're really excited about for our district, because we've talked about a lot of really deep topics and some that people are really upset about, but ultimately my family moved here for the schools, and overall we are incredibly privileged, and I am optimistic. I'm optimistic when I hear that we have an innovation center that started at Palo Verde and will go to all of our elementary schools where we're in age and developmentally appropriate ways getting elementary schoolers to start to explore, and then those things directly track to the CTE and the pathways that we have in high school. That is exciting when we're doing things at all levels that play together to get our students to become inspired and find to pursue their passions and own their futures. That is something that excites me. I am optimistic about our district because we do have a budget that is not dependent on the number of students we have. So as we have declining enrollment, we have the opportunity to try to do even better, like making sure that TK is not just 3 hours, even though that's what the state requires. Things where I work with students that are experiencing the opportunity gap in our middle schools. As a nonprofit, somebody outside the school district, we can use some of the funding that we have to look at how can we make sure to close the opportunity gap even earlier by thinking about how to invest in early childhood education and be a leader, because we see that preschool for all is something that our state is going to do. So I'm so optimistic about everything Palo Alto has to offer and we can do to be a leader in public schools in California.
Thank you. Ms. Kamai?
So I guess the question would be why am I here? And I think that I'm here because I care. And my guess is that for all of you tuning in now or that may be listening later, that's why you're here too. That we're all here because we care. We don't just kind of care. We really care about our community, about our teachers, about our staff, about our family, and about our kids. I come from a long line of educators, 4 generations on 2 different sides. My great-grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse. My great-grandfather on a different side taught in the Great Depression. My parents were still in the classroom, refused to retire. My husband teaches, my sister teaches. I taught for a couple years as a clinical teaching fellow at the Stanford Immigrants' Rights Clinic at the law school. My current job, I do a lot of continuing legal education, think a lot about pedagogy, and help write manuals and textbooks. I say this to say I'm surrounded by educators and share the understanding of the goals, the challenges, and this shared commitment to service and to our students. I also come to service a different way. I worked with youth in high school in the National Conference of Community and Justice, issues of racism and belonging, and first moved here in 1999, and so really come to this from a perspective of student empowerment and of bringing us together in our shared values. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colohan?
So to start off, I want to make sure that everyone knows that if they want to learn more about my campaign and my priorities, you can go to chrisforschoolboard.com and you can learn tons of stuff there. But let me just quickly go over what are the 3 things that I think are most important for us to work on, and I hope to work on with some of my colleagues here when we get elected. Well, the first thing is we need to improve our elementary school math. I went over some of the problems that we have earlier, but the solution is actually something which the current board has been advocating for a while, and has been polled by the district, yeah, we should do that, definitely, just not quite yet. And I think it's about time that we create a parallel to the Every Student Reads initiative that's been going on for the past 4 years, but for elementary school math, to try and improve the number of students we have at the end of 5th grade reaching grade level. Second problem I want to work on is trust. Ever since COVID, we've had a breakdown in trust of our district, where parents don't trust the district as much as they used to, teachers don't trust the administration, and the administration reacts with mistrust from parents. We saw this in spades over the past week with the bathroom issue, which we shall not talk any more about right now. But yeah, so we need to work on that. And the answer to that is transparency, and I can talk further about it offline. And the third thing is budget transparency. We need to make sure that our budget is more understandable to more people. And I'm running out of time, so I just want to say, for the last thing, is that all of us up here have the same goal in common, which is we care deeply for our kids.
All right, thank you. Ms. Chu?
A question that I always wish I could be asked on any panel is, how can I take the work that I've done globally and make it applicable locally? Because I'm asked this question often in one-on-ones where people feel that I've done more work globally than I have locally. And I want to say this: I think that in all of my poverty alleviation work across East and South Africa, I've obviously worked in communities that are very difficult and very different from Palo Alto. But I would say that the principle of what drives that work in poverty alleviation is that every child deserves to thrive, no matter how difficult the circumstances are, no matter how difficult the conversations are between stakeholders, and how irresolvable the problems seem. The advocating for every child in any country or any school district, indeed, is deeply important, that everybody is represented. And that is a skill that I hope to bring to this district. Through my work with the Me Too movement, I've constantly advocated for the underdog and the underrepresented. And this will, again, always be relevant, even in a district that often seems as well-resourced and as privileged as Palo Alto. So I bring my diversity hat, my advocating for the underdog hat, and I plan to make it relevant for this school district in my work, hopefully on the board. Thank you.
Thank you all for your thoughtful answers. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto and Palo Alto Council of PTAs, I want to thank the candidates for your dedication in choosing to run for office and for participating in this forum. Thank you. I also want to thank our audience for your engagement in our democratic process. For the November 5th general election, the Santa Clara County League are also hosting forums for many other races. Visit the LWV of Santa Clara County website, where you can find videos of these forums, or our website, lwvpaloalto.org. We also encourage you to visit vote411.org. There, you will find nonpartisan, expanded information about candidates and ballot measures, and links to other sources of information about the upcoming election. For the November 5th general election, all California voters will receive vote-by-mail ballots, which will be mailed starting October 7th. We encourage you to vote early, by mail, or by dropping off your ballot at the secure ballot drop box. You can also visit a vote center on or before Election Day. For example, if you need assistance or require a replacement ballot because you misplaced yours or made a mistake on it. Locations of vote centers and days and hours of operation will be listed in your ballot. Please encourage your family, friends, and neighbors to vote by November 5th. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.